Hello, dear viewers. Aslan Usoyan was born on February 28, 1937, in Tbilisi. He was of Yazidi origin. At 19, he received his first sentence for resisting police officers, 1.5 years imprisonment. Later, the Supreme Court of the Georgian SSR reclassified the case, and Usoyan was released in January 1959. The Stalin District Court of Tbilisi found Usoyan guilty of robbery and sentenced him to 5 years imprisonment. However, he managed to obtain early parole. Upon release, Usoyan engaged in currency operations and pickpocketing in Georgia, and was close to the thief-in-law Elad Darian, who was among the first to collect tributes from underground entrepreneurs. Usoyan received the title of thief-in-law in 1963. In December 1966, the October District Court of Tbilisi sentenced Usoyan to 3 years imprisonment for speculation. However, in June 1968, he was released early by decision of the Syrian District Court of Georgia. According to some sources, Usoyan received the title of thief-in-law on the recommendation of authorities David Shamyansky and Koroch Fartovi. During this imprisonment term, in 1963, a second coronation ceremony may have taken place according to all the rules in the correctional facility. Upon release, Usoyan engaged in fraudulent operations and shadow deals, particularly selling counterfeit gold coins brought from Central Asia. Members of Usoyan's organization collected tributes from underground manufacturers, shell game operators, speculators, and other illicit dealers, as well as from directors of state restaurants, stores, markets, vegetable warehouses, and sewing workshops. They established extensive corrupt connections among Georgian officials and police officers. In August 1984, Usoyan was convicted in Tbilisi on multiple charges: illegal possession of narcotics, illegal entrepreneurship, and document forgery, and sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. Initially as a thief-in-law, Usoyan was transferred to Perm Correctional Labor Colony No. 6, better known as White Swan. There he was forced to sign a statement about cooperating with the Ministry of Internal Affairs and renouncing criminal traditions. All thieves-in-law were forced to sign such statements, supposedly having chosen the path of rehabilitation. Afterward, he was transferred to an Omsk correctional facility. Since local Slavic authorities held strong positions there, and by agreement with the operational department of the USSR Ministry of Internal Affairs, Usoyan was transferred to the Middle Urals. While serving his term at Correctional Labor Colony No. 7 in the Sverdlovsk region, Usoyan brought practically the entire prison world of the Urals under his influence. The operational department of the Correctional Affairs Administration of the Sverdlovsk region's Internal Affairs Department made a secret agreement with Usoyan under the guise of operational contact. He would use his authority among prisoners to maintain order in the correctional facilities of Nizhny Tagil. At that time, about 15,000 convicted persons from across the country were serving sentences there. The Regional Ministry of Internal Affairs ceased all operational activities regarding thieves-in-law transferred to Nizhny Tagil, who were friendly to Usoyan. However, local police continued secret work with prison authorities. Usoyan promised to maintain a loyal attitude toward the rules established by the colony administration, improve discipline, and stop mass disturbances among prisoners. In response, he was allowed to place his representatives in the problematic Tagil facilities, ITK-40, ITK-17, and ITK-5. The majority of Caucasian and some Slavic thieves-in-law recognized Usoyan as the most senior and influential authority. Meanwhile, Usoyan's people organized the smuggling of tea, cigarettes, alcohol, and money behind barbed wire, as well as the theft of precious metals from Ural enterprises and their transfer to the Caucasus. During his sentence, Usoyan crowned several thieves, including his nephew Timur Mirzoev, nicknamed Timur Tbiliski or Timur Sverdlovsky. The ceremony took place in autumn 1987 in one of the detention center facilities. Outside, youth groups of athletes were growing stronger and did not recognize criminal traditions. To counter them and deal with the local criminal situation, Timur formed his own group, with headquarters at the Sverdlovsk restaurant Cosmos. Timur's group, after he became the overseer for Sverdlovsk, was supported by shadow businessman Igor Tarlinov, owner of a casino that opened in the Cosmos premises. But behind him stood the powerful Uralmash organization. Soon, Usoyan's representatives, besides Sverdlovsk, were placed in Nizhny Tagil, Chelyabinsk, and Zlatust. From 1990, a redistribution of spheres of influence began in Ural cities, accompanied by murders of organization members and entrepreneurs close to the criminal world. It was then that legends first appeared that the secret KGB team Alpha was connected to Usoyan. According to one version, this rumor was spread by Usoyan's circle. Usoyan's organization attracted youth gangs, subordinated cooperatives, and underground manufacturers, especially local Caucasians, as well as drug traffickers. Supplies to the Urals came through Usoyan's connections in Tashkent. Usoyan's representatives held meetings in visiting rooms of many Ural colonies, discussing business and providing financial assistance to prisoners. Usoyan declared some undesirable thieves and authorities to be violators and traitors of criminal law, essentially sanctioning their elimination. Other people Usoyan simply handed over to the police. In December 1991, the Nizhny Tagil court decided to grant Usoyan early parole. As in all previous cases, there were grounds to believe that bribes and pressure from Usoyan's high-ranking patrons contributed to this. In March 1992, Usoyan was released and held a picnic in the village of Nikolopavlovskoye, a suburb of Nizhny Tagil, to mark the occasion. This was essentially a meeting of Ural authorities, at which Usoyan quarreled with Igor Tarlanov. After his release, Usoyan lived briefly in Yekaterinburg, then officially registered in the city of Gorodovsk, but spent most of his time in Moscow and the North Caucasus. Usoyan's greatest influence was in the North Caucasus, which was considered the domain of his criminal organization. Usoyan's interests extended to Kislovodsk, Mineralny Vody, Krasnodar, and Sochi, where his representatives resided. During the Georgian-Abkhazian conflict of 1992 to 1993, Usoyan provided financial assistance to the Abkhazian side, which led to suspicions of his involvement in the disappearance in Moscow of the old thief-in-law Givi Baranye, nicknamed Rezani, who supported the Georgian side. According to Turkish and Spanish press reports, Usoyan was involved in arms supplies to the Kurdistan Workers' Party. In Moscow, the interests of Usoyan's organization were lobbied by the highly influential thief-in-law Rafael Bagdasaryan, nicknamed Rafik Yerevansky, or Rhodos. In early 1993, the organization's positions in Ukraine were defended by Kiev thief-in-law Valery Kirillov, nicknamed Antimos, crowned by Usoyan in 1992. By the mid-1990s, Usoyan's organization's interests extended to the North Caucasus, Moscow, St. Petersburg, Yekaterinburg, Ukraine, as well as some cities and business spheres in Western Europe, the Baltic states, and Israel. Trusted associates of Usoyan and Shakro Molodoy were founders and co-owners of banks, trading companies, casinos, hotels, restaurants, and markets. The largest conflict of the second half of the 1990s in Usoyan's biography was his war with the brothers Rudolf and Chikos Aganov, both thieves-in-law. Formally, Rudolf Aganov, nicknamed Rudik Bakinsky, accused Usoyan of embezzling funds that Armenian authorities from Uzbekistan were sending to Moscow, as well as crowning unworthy individuals. Usoyan was invited to criminal meetings 3 times but did not appear. At one of them, held in November 1997 in the Moscow region, it was decided to strip Usoyan of his title, which was supported by such influential thieves-in-law as Nikolai Yazykov, nicknamed Kutyonok, and Stepan Frolov, nicknamed Stepa Murmansky. Former friends of Usoyan from among Kurds and Yazidis sided with the Aganovs. Authorities Nadir Chahagrosh, nicknamed Non, and Valery Frizov, nicknamed Valera Kurt. The true cause of the conflict was the redistribution of spheres of influence in Krasnodar territory. The first spark was the 1995 murder in Moscow of Adamais Faganyan, close to the Aganov brothers. On April 15, 1996, an assassination attempt was made on the Aganov brothers in Pyatigorsk. Additionally, that same year, 2 of their supporters and businessmen Eduard Avalian were killed at the Moscow restaurant Pomidor, resulting in the accidental deaths of 2 pensioners. In July 1996, Usoyan was detained by St. Petersburg RUOP officers in a car with criminal entrepreneur Georgy Dash, deputy chairman of the Legislative Assembly of St. Petersburg, Viktor Novoselov. A TT pistol was found on Usoyan and a large sum of money in his apartment. At the same time, Usoyan's son was detained in Moscow. Within a short time, a large monetary bail was posted for Usoyan, and he was released. Temporarily, Usoyan was forced to leave St. Petersburg, but soon returned. In 1997, the Aganov brothers struck back at Usoyan's supporters. First, Necker Kozin, suspected of attempting to assassinate Rudik, was kidnapped and killed after torture. According to operational information, Necker was kidnapped and then concreted into the wall of a dacha in the village of Tuchkova under the direction of a Moscow police officer. Then, near the Moscow Café Syntez, thief-in-law Arthur Kulkov, nicknamed Boroda, and two members of his gang were killed. In January 1998, Usoyan and Zakhary Kalashov, nicknamed Shakro Molodoy, convened a meeting in the city of Shakhty, attended by 45 thieves-in-law from various regions of Russia. Local police prevented the peaceful conduct of the meeting. In April 1998, a meeting with Kutyunok was supposed to take place in Kazakhstan, which he could not attend without explanation. On June 19, 1998, 3 gunmen shot Kutyunok and 2 of his bodyguards at the Perm nightclub Bolid. On October 17, 1998, another assassination attempt was made on Aganov in the Naro-Fominsk district of the Moscow region. His motorcade was fired upon with a grenade launcher and automatic weapons, resulting in the deaths of 2 guards and severe injuries to 1. On February 17, 1999, at the roadside cafe Mir at the 51st kilometer, approximately 32nd mile, of the Moscow Ring Road, killers finally shot Rudik Bakinsky. Soon his brother Chikos, who had sworn to avenge Usoyan, was killed. In total, during the war between Usoyan and the Aganov brothers, more than 150 people from both sides were killed. In the Mineralnya Vody area alone, 37 authorities were eliminated. In May 2006, thief-in-law Zakhary Kalashov, nicknamed Shakro Molodoy, was arrested in the United Arab Emirates and extradited to Spain. The division of his large business in Russia and Western Europe resulted in a conflict between Usoyan's organization, which sided with Lasha Shinashvili, nicknamed Lasha Stavropolsky, and another influential thief-in-law, Tariel Oniani, nicknamed Taro. By this time, Usoyan's de facto headquarters was a separate office in the Moscow restaurant Stary Phaeton on Bolshaya Nikitskaya Street. Here he received visitors, including high-ranking officers of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and FSB, and resolved criminal, commercial, and economic matters. Usoyan's sphere of interests included debt collection, obtaining credits, patronage of companies and protection from intimidation, control over some vegetable, clothing, and construction markets, land plots, bribes in the construction sector, and illegal gambling business. Initially, the confrontation between Usoyan and Taro was limited to numerous meetings, at which organization leaders secured support from other authorities, recruited new supporters, including through crowning newcomers, and accused opponents of deviating from criminal traditions. On May 2, 2008, Usoyan held a meeting at which Yaponchik sided with him in the conflict between organizations. While serving his sentence in the late 1980s and early 1990s at Colony No. 2 in the city of Tulun, Yaponchik quarreled with the very influential thief-in-law in the Irkutsk region, Ilya Simonia, nicknamed Maku, a friend of Oniani. Since then, the conflict between Yaponchik and Usoyan, who supported him on one side, and Taro on the other, alternately subsided and flared up. In July 2008, Usoyan was detained in the Moscow region by officers of the Department for Combating Organized Crime and Terrorism of the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs, but after a preventive conversation, he was released. On July 8, 2008, Oniani convened his representative meeting at Pirogov Reservoir. Special forces landed on the rented boat and detained several dozen criminal leaders close or loyal to Usoyan's organization. There is evidence that information about the meeting could have been provided to law enforcement by people from Usoyan's circle. On November 17, 2008, restaurateur Georgy Tovsuri, considered Taro's right-hand man, received a fatal wound. He managed Oniani's legal business and was responsible for organizing the meeting at Pirogov Reservoir. On February 6, 2009, thief-in-law Oleg Minayev, nicknamed Alik Sochinsky, was killed in Moscow, and on May 22, 2009, thief-in-law Andrei Golubevsky and authority Alexander Korsakov, nicknamed Korsak, were killed. All three were Usoyan supporters. In June of that year, Oniani himself was arrested for kidnapping a businessman and extorting money from him in the elite village of Gorky II. In July 2010, the Khamovnicheski court sentenced Taro to 10 years of strict regime imprisonment. On July 28, 2009, Vyacheslav Ivankov, nicknamed Yaponchik, a longtime friend and partner of Usoyan, received a fatal wound near the Moscow restaurant Taisky Slon. On March 18, 2010, thief-in-law Vladimir Janasha, nicknamed Lada, an Oniani supporter, was killed in France. On May 10, 2010, authority Malchaz Pike, nicknamed Machania, also close to Taro's organization, was killed in Greece. Soon in Thessaloniki, under strange circumstances, Labyrinth Chelakidze, nicknamed Leova Greek, Usoyan's associate, died. After the assassination attempt on Yaponchik, Usoyan was able to convince the criminal community of Oniani's people's involvement in this, and also organized a letter signed by many authorities in which Oniani was essentially given a death sentence. Most Slavic thieves-in-law, who had previously distanced themselves from the conflict between Usoyan and Taro, sided with Usoyan. Another group of thieves claimed that Usoyan himself was involved in the assassination attempt on Yaponchik, fearing an audit of the common fund, part of which was kept by his relatives. Usoyan did not even attend Yaponchik's funeral, traveling between Sochi and Abkhazia. By that time, Usoyan's positions were very strong. In practically every region of Russia, and almost all former USSR countries, overseers from his organization were placed, both from influential authorities who joined the organization and from recently crowned ones, who eliminated the organization's competitors in their jurisdictions. Parallel to the war against Oniani's organization, in 2009, Usoyan intervened in another bloody war between two criminal organizations for control over Moscow's wholesale markets. On one side of the conflict was the organization of thief-in-law Vaka Aliev, nicknamed Vaka, who was supported by Usoyan, and opposing them was the organization of thief-in-law Rovshan Janiev, nicknamed Rovshan Lenkaransky, who during Vaka's imprisonment had taken control of many assets and essentially established control over the wholesale markets of the Moscow region. Usoyan did not forget to strengthen his presence in post-Soviet countries, crowning local criminal leaders from among his supporters or sending his overseers to these countries. Thus, in 2008, he crowned in Moscow on one day Vasily Stanchu, nicknamed Vasya Moldovan, the only Moldovan authority at liberty at that time, and Kamchi Kolbayev, the only Kyrgyz thief-in-law in the post-Soviet space. On the evening of September 16, 2010, in Moscow on Tverskaya Street, in the courtyard of Building 12/7, an assassination attempt was made on Aslan Usoyan. He had come to visit his son, who lived in this building, or, according to other data, had lived in this building for a long time, having registered the apartment in his son's name. Usoyan received a gunshot wound to the abdomen, and his bodyguard, Arthur Bagramian, received wounds to the shoulder and chest. They fired from a Kalashnikov rifle with a silencer from the window of the apartment of famous artist Mikhail Gurevich, located on the third floor of Building 12. Both wounded were taken to Botkin Hospital and operated on. Initially, law enforcement agencies even announced Usoyan's death, but later explained this as being in the interests of the investigation and an attempt to expose the organizers. Some people from Usoyan's circle claimed that the assassination attempt was organized by his longtime associate, thief-in-law, Mirab Jungviladze, nicknamed Mirab Sukumsky, while others accused Azerbaijani thief-in-law Rovshan Janiev of the shooting. Additionally, several sources pointed to thief-in-law Alexei Suvorov, nicknamed Petrik or Ludyakha Kitry Starshega, who after Yaponchik's murder became the unofficial leader of the Slavic criminal wing. In spring 2011, the leadership of the so-called United Opposition opposing Usoyan's organization, including thieves-in-law Tariel Oniani, nicknamed Taro, Mirab Jungviladze, nicknamed Merab Sukhumsky, Rovshan Janiev, nicknamed Rovshan Lenkaransky, Gaji Mikaladze, nicknamed Jima, and Alexander Bar, nicknamed Timocha, declared a moratorium on Usoyan's numerous crownings. In a letter sent to prison colonies, the opposition members threatened candidates and those who would crown them with serious trouble if the moratorium was violated. According to Italian police data, on September 18, 2012, Mirab Jangvaladze, nicknamed Merab Sukhumsky, gathered his closest associates to discuss the protracted war with Usoyan's organization. According to some data, Usoyan's enemies from other organizations also attended the meeting, including thieves-in-law Ravshan Janiev and Gaji Mikaladze, nicknamed Jima, who were part of the leadership of the so-called United Opposition. During telephone conversations with Usoyan, and some participants at that time were in places of detention, the authorities decided to eliminate Aslan Usoyan. On January 16, 2013, at the restaurant Stadi Phaeton, located in the wing of the Central House of Writers on Bolshaya Nikitskaya Street, Usoyan received a fatal head wound from a Val rifle, after which he died in the intensive care unit of Botkin Hospital. According to other sources, he died in the ambulance. According to other data, the murder occurred at the restaurant Karetny Dvor on Povarskaya Street. Both of these restaurants are part of a small square around the monument to Leo Tolstoy between Povarskaya and Bolshaya Nikitskaya streets. Additionally, during the assassination attempt, a restaurant waitress was seriously wounded. The killer fired from a sniper rifle or silent automatic weapon from a stairwell landing or attic located above the former apartment of Sergei Mikhalkov, building number 35 on Povarskaya Street. Initially, criminal representatives planned to bury Usoyan at the prestigious Nikolskoye Cemetery next to Yaponchik's grave or at Ilinskoye Cemetery in Krasnodar territory, but the family insisted on fulfilling Usoyan's will to be buried next to his mother and brother in Tbilisi at the Yazidi section of the old Kukia Cemetery, since his wife Dusha, his daughter Nuna, his sister, and other relatives lived in Tbilisi and had received preliminary permission from Georgian authorities. Late in the evening of January 17th, a civil memorial service was held in the ritual hall of Moscow's Troyekurovskoye Cemetery, attended by major representatives of the criminal world for whom travel to Georgia was impossible. After the memorial service, when Usoyan's body was taken to Vnukovo Airport, a charter plane from Ukrainian airline Windrose Airlines was waiting. According to colleagues' reviews, the deceased was known for a certain fairness in resolving criminal conflicts. His word carried great weight and was often decisive. He did not directly control entrepreneurs, although he received offerings from them for various services. Officially, this money went to the Criminal Common Fund. Businessmen who paid tribute to Usoyan's people noted his honesty and broad capabilities in resolving conflict situations. Verbally, Usoyan opposed bloodshed in the criminal environment, calling for peaceful resolution of conflicts, but he never forgave personal offenses or people who questioned his authority and integrity. In everyday life, Usoyan was characterized by a quiet temperament and modesty, preferring not to attract attention. Usoyan spoke several Caucasian languages fluently and was distinguished by sharp intelligence and broad outlook. Despite his influence, Usoyan always claimed to be a simple Russian pensioner with no connection to crime. Usoyan, or people from his inner circle, possessed compromising materials on many influential people, including officials, politicians, and entertainers. Professor Mark Galeotti, an expert on the Russian criminal world from New York University, characterized Aslan Usoyan as follows: "He was a fat spider at the center of a web and never lied." Washington Post correspondent Catherine Belton called Usoyan the Russian Don Corleone. The British newspaper The Times commented on Usoyan's death: "A man who was known as Russia's biggest criminal boss has been killed." Spanish newspaper El País noted that Usoyan died in accordance with the code by which the Russian criminal world operates. According to journalist Sergei Dorenko, "With Usoyan, we buried a certain era of the criminal world." The story of Aslan Usoyan demonstrates how criminal structures influence society and the economy of the post-Soviet space. It's a reminder that choosing the criminal path inevitably leads to violence and a tragic end. Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and give us a like if you found this material informative.